Welcome to Bad Dog Agility, a podcast helping you reach all of your dog agility goals. Whether it's competing under the bright lights of the televised finals at Westminster or successfully navigating a homemade course in your own backyard, we'll bring you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
The show starts with your hosts, Jennifer, Esteban, and Sarah.
I'm Jennifer.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 360. This podcast is brought to you by Synovitin OA. Hey, dog lovers, is your furry friend limping or struggling to enjoy agility like they used to? It might be osteoarthritis, OA, a common source of pain and mobility issues in dogs that's driven by inflammation in their joints. Synovitin OA is a groundbreaking one-time injection into the arthritic joint that targets the very cells causing the pain and inflammation. The benefits are huge. With Synovitin OA, relief can last up to 1 full year with just one simple treatment, dramatically improving your dog's quality of life. And since it works only in the joint, there aren't any systemic side effects that are so common with daily drugs and injections, so you can be assured it's safe for your dog. Don't let your dog suffer from the pain of arthritis. Visit activedognow.com to learn more about Synovitin OA and give your dog the gift of long-lasting pain-free movement. Studied in canine elbows, Synovitin OA is given by authorized veterinarians. Temporary discomfort in treated joints may occur. Talk to a treating veterinarian near you for more information, including what to expect following treatment, and visit www.activedognow.com. Today, we're going to be talking about some common mistakes that we see as instructors, or really, we might even say mistakes that we saw this week between the three of us. And I'm going to start out by talking about something that I have seen several times among several different people who have been sending me video for review. So as part of our VIP program, people will send in exercises that they're working on, and I'm taking a look at it, and what will often happen is that there will be a sequence of, let's say 8 jumps, and there's kind of a tricky handling element at obstacle 5. And so somebody might send in a video where they make a mistake at obstacle 5 at the kind of tricky handling bit. And as they're working on their own, they went back to number 1 and they tried the whole sequence again. And then a lot of times they end up with the same mistake at obstacle 5. They go back all the way to number 1 and they handle it again. And maybe they try to do something a little bit different, help their dog in some way. But the point is that every single time they attempt this sequence, they're going all the way back to the beginning. And I think of it almost like a little problem with the human brain, right? We see this sequence that starts at 1 and ends at 8, and we just feel compelled to start at 1. But when you're working on a sequence all by yourself, and the goal of the sequence is to teach your dog something, you're not getting any points, you're not getting any ribbons or anything like that. I think that misses the opportunity to create a learning moment, at that moment with your dog. And so what I have, the feedback that I've given several different people this week is that I want them, if they want to retry it one time, so that, just in case you kind of weren't quite crisp with your handling, or maybe after your dog didn't get the reward, now they kind of are like, oh, okay, now I understand that obstacle was supposed to be a backside. Like I always say, you can try things one additional time, but once they've made the same mistake twice in a row, I want people to break it down. And by breaking it down, I would say, let's start with the hard part, right? So if the problem is obstacle 5, let's start with 5 or maybe 4, right? Like start one obstacle before. Take out the speed that the dog has, which can often be a contributing factor to making a mistake, right? Get them settled and focused and work on the one little skill that is tripping you up. You can do 1, 2, 3, 4 correctly, right? There's no need to continue and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the way to 5. And then you can kind of put it all together after you've broken it down into pieces. And I think that this is kind of on my mind because I also have a young, inexperienced dog. And this is exactly what I have been doing. I will, if I have an 8 obstacle sequence, I might do 1, 2, 3 reward. Even if he never makes a mistake with an inexperienced dog, I might do 1, 2, 3 reward. Then I might do 3, 4, 5 reward. Then I might do, 4, 5, 6. So I'm kind of moving the little set of obstacles that I'm working on in the sequence and getting the rewards in, having the teaching moments. And only when I feel like my dog has all of the pieces do I put it into a whole.
Yeah, I think that's really well done. I kind of think of it as testing versus teaching.
Yes.
If you go to a weekly class and your instructor sets up a course or a sequence for everyone to do and says, hey, handle it all with front crosses or all with blinds or something, that's a test. Can you and your dog do this test? And you're going to try and do it. Once you have the information that you can't do it, right? You failed. I think it is reasonable for the most part, depending on the nature of the mistake or failure, to say, okay, one more shot, right? But in general, for myself, I tried to hold to that rule where if there was going to be what would that be? A third attempt?
Right.
Yeah, that third one, I would have to change something. The height of the bar, the angle of the jump, right? The approach of the dog, as you said, maybe to bleed a little speed or something like that, depending on what you're working on. Because now you've moved into that teaching phase. So you're done with the testing phase. You tested, you failed. And now it's time to teach the dog something, or as Sarah likes to say here in Texas, to learn the dog something.
I don't say that.
I say that all the time.
No.
I'm about to learn you something. Let me show you how to change the oil in this car.
Okay, maybe I've said that.
It's endearing. I like it. It's regional.
Yeah.
Yeah, I often use the phrase, first failure, shame on the dog. Second failure, shame on the handler. Basically, the idea that on the first failure, it's not ever really shame on the dog, but it's like, okay, maybe the dog wasn't thinking or they miscalculated. You withhold reinforcement or you mark or you do whatever. And you try again to see if they learned from that. Like, did the absence of the reinforcement make them go, oh, that wasn't right. I need to do better. So then on the second try, if they fail a second time, now it's shame on the handler, because now, in my opinion, you are asking them to do something that they're not qualified to do. So as you said, they failed the test. So just this week, it actually happened with B this week, sent her on a week full entry. She failed. As soon as she entered wrong, she knew, and I kind of stopped. And then we just repeated it. I just went right back to the beginning. It was a little bit odd that she missed it. And I just went right back to the beginning. And on the second try, she got it. So it was kind of like her brain clicked and said, oh, wait a minute, that wasn't right. She modified. But had she failed the second time, that's when I would have then helped her, whether that be a wire or whether that be back chaining and breaking down the sequence. But that's kind of a little motto. You have your Texas motto about learning the dog something. That's often something that I'll tell my students. First time, shame on the dog. Second time, shame on the handler.
Yeah. And I also wanted to say that when you break things down well, you actually get to the result, in my opinion, so much faster than if you're just repeating and trying to do the whole thing all at once. And I think that sometimes I do think that there is an element when people are doing things online that they're like focused on doing the sequence to get the feedback, and so they're really hyper focused on like completion of the sequence. But I think that, like, for example, I was doing some work with my dog where there's like a tunnel and a wing. And the wing is like really close to the tunnel. And are you listening to me when I tell you to wrap the wing instead of go into the tunnel? Right. And if I just try that and my dog fails and I just keep going back and just trying that over and over and over and over again, I might actually never get success, right? Like my dog might make that mistake over and over or start guessing or whatever. But if you pull the wing further away from the tunnel and do the exact same drill, but now it's easier. Like, I was frankly a little shocked at how fast I could then move the wing right next to the tunnel in that same position where I could have probably done it all day long without getting success, and have him start like consistently getting the right one based on the verbal, right? So it goes faster. Like, even though it feels like you're, quote, doing less or taking smaller steps, you actually get to the finish line way faster than beating your head against just doing the same thing over and over and over.
I really like how, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I think this also becomes super in play. I mean, you're talking about it from the standpoint of the young dogs, and I could not agree more. But I also think we have to look at it from the standpoint of the older dogs. Because I always tell people, especially when you get into the older dogs, you only have so many obstacles that seem appropriate in a training session. So maybe in a training session for your 9-year-old dog, it's like, you know what, 60 obstacles is the most I'm going to do in this session. All right. Well, do you want to waste those 60 obstacles on things that you already proved your dog can do? So as Sarah, you were saying, like if the failure is at obstacle 5, every time you go back and repeat and the mistake happens again at 5, those 1 through 4 are kind of wasted. So I think you can almost look at this in all ranges and all aspects, because I'm that way with my older dogs, of being mindful of how much equipment am I going to ask them to do in this session. And once they've already proven that they can do something clean, do I need to repeat it and quote unquote waste the jumps or waste the wear and tear on the dog?
There are times I think that Jennifer and I are the same person, because when I was listening to you talk, Sarah, I had the exact same thought. My example was Gitchy, and as many people know, she was a bit of a bar knocker, right? So on tough international courses, some amount of the mistakes, in fact, I would say probably more than half of the mistakes she would make is a dropped bar, especially in the early days when we were still jumping 26 inches, 24 inches, getting ready for those tryout type competition on tougher international style courses. And so you'd have to really think about it. You know, as you said, if the mistake's coming at obstacle 5 and 1, 2, 3 is a simple lead out and a pivot, you do that a couple of times, and every once in a while she's going to knock bar 2, knock 3, and then as she becomes more fatigued, it's just not going to happen. So that there were some days where we would set up a course and maybe run it 2, 3 times, 2, 3 turns per person. By the time that I could successfully have done each element at least once, it's basically a patchwork of a course. I never ran it clean from start to finish. That would really bother some other people.
Right.
Okay. They would be like, I do not consider this thing mastered until I can do it. They may even leave the course up and say, I'm going to spend the next week or the next day on my own. I'm going to come out to the field again until we can do it straight from beginning to end. And I never took that approach. There were any number of courses while we were getting ready for any number of big events where I simply never ran that course from beginning to end clean. But I feel like we got all that benefit. So something you do need to do is protect your dog's reps when they're a little bit older. So that's a really cool thing that Jennifer pointed out. I also liked how she mentioned Bea in her example, because as we all know, Bea has had a tremendous, legendary, epic history, still making a mistake every now and then. And I think with those dogs who have that reinforcement history and can do certain things, it makes perfect sense to go a second time, maybe even a third time. But if I've never really taught a dog a throttle and I'm working on a difficult throttle spot and they're new and they're 3 years old and we haven't really done this, I sometimes I won't even ask for the second attempt back from obstacle 1 for this mistake that's happening at 7. I just go right to that issue. It really doesn't make sense. And so I think that's where, if you are a novice handler listening to this, take heed, listen to what we're saying as more experienced competitors who have been through it with many, many different dogs and helped many, many people with many, many of their dogs. And this is just something we see over and over and over again. You can do it a little better. Let it go. I think that's the start of what Sarah's saying here. Let it go. It's not about getting 1 through 8 all in one shot. It's okay.
Right. So that was my kind of, as a coach, takeaway for the week that I wanted to share with everybody. So Jen, what is something that has popped up for you this week as an instructor that you're like, yep, this is something that I see time and time again, and let's let the audience know how they can do better?
Yeah, I actually want to talk about one that I see both through the online teaching, but also the live. So like when I start seeing the mistakes happen in my live classes and lessons, but then I'm also doing video feedback and analyzing runs and see it there, I know it's something that's worth talking about. And that is how people will, if we use the word correct, reattempt or correct a failure on independent obstacles. So what I'm specifically talking about here is contacts and weaves. All right. So you're running a sequence or you're running a course, dog misses the weave pull entry. You're running a sequence, you're running a course, dog flies off on the teeter. So often what I see is people will then, because it's training, they will then fix that single obstacle without taking into account that the potential reason the dog was having the mistake was all of the speed or the angle leading into it. Mm-hmm. So in class, it might be a hard weave pull entry and the dog misses the weave pull entry. And I think in class, it's hard. They feel this rush. I see this a lot at trials as well. So they fix it right there at the weave pulls, but that doesn't allow them to recreate that hard entry. Or a lot of times with contacts, maybe it's the speed, right? Your dog had the fly off on the teeter because of the speed. It was, a tunnel to a jump to a teeter. And when the dog does the fly off, all you fix is the teeter. Well, that's great, except the issue wasn't the teeter performance or understanding the behavior. It was the speed and the line coming into it. So a lot of times in class, when people try to fix it, I'm like, no, go all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of follow the rule of fix and go, which is back 3 obstacles. And I think that's kind of a good little tidbit for you guys as well, is those of you that are trialing and are competing, particularly in AKC, sometimes people underutilize the fix and go. So they know they can do a fix and go, but on a contact and weave, they might only fix that obstacle, which technically isn't a fix and go. But if I recall, the rules allow you to go back up to 3 obstacles. And I tell people, take advantage of that. So if your dog misses a weave pull entry and your dog has a struggle on a contact, and this is assuming that normal criteria is fine. Like the dog does have the criteria on the teeter or the contact and normally would, have reasonable understanding on the weaves. Go back, right? Go back 2, 3 obstacles, recreate the momentum, recreate the angle, really think about why did your dog have that failure, right? For a lot of them, it's not lack of understanding. It's something about that approach or the speed. And so it's really analyzing why the mistake happened and making sure that you're training through that exact mistake.
Yeah, that's such a good example. And I see that a lot as well. I guess it's my turn then. So, I tend to work with people who have issues with start lines, and I do a lot of the start line content for Bad Dog Agility and for our VIP members as well. And that's because I have had dogs with those issues, and I've worked with people who had like very, I would say, extreme issues with start lines where there's a tremendous amount of stress, or dogs that are labeled as super high arousal, and those dogs really struggle. But you'll find that, with Jen, with her live classes, with the contacts, and you, Sarah, with video submissions, that when people want to submit video, especially in training, just for the purpose of that one video, that one sequence, they're going to let the start lines go a little bit, right? And so I think it's very important that we approach start line mistakes with consistency. In my opinion, consistency is point number 1, and then point number 2 is the idea of building value for start lines. So the other thing that I don't see people do and that they should do is reinforce their start lines more often, so that it turns out once you teach your dog a start line, people very rarely enter any kind of maintenance for that start line, whereas they naturally do for weaves and A-frames and contacts and things. And what I mean by maintenance is, let's say you run 10 full courses over a month, right? Maybe you have 5 weeks of class and you got 2 turns each. And so 10 times, let's say 3 of those times was standard, 2 was jumpers. Okay, so we're looking at 6 dog walks. And out of those 6 dog walks, I think a smart trainer, again, depends on the level of your dog, but a smart trainer might pick 1 or 2 of those to randomly reinforce the dog, even if you're running clean in the middle of a 22 obstacle sequence course, right? And so you have this variable reinforcement of an excellent contact. I think that's excellent training, right? And unfortunately, with start lines, people don't really do that. The people who do tend to do that, of course, are people who have had issues with start lines with other dogs or with that dog, and they're going through some kind of training. And so Gitchy, I remember, was a retrain. Her mother was a terrible start line breaker. And for dogs with big issues, I kind of keep them on a lifetime. What I tell people is 1 out of 5. So 1 out of every 5 times I set up a dog at a start line, I immediately reinforce, either within 1 second or 3 seconds. But there's no taking 1 or 2 obstacles and then reinforcing it. I am reinforcing the start line directly, right? So I think that goes to point number 2. So point number 1 is consistency. I'm not going to let a dog break just for the video, just to be able to submit something, especially for those of you who are doing some of the organizations that do home videoing and you can do titles and things like that,
like the league and stuff.
Be very, very careful with that. Take the time, work through your start lines, make sure that you're getting that from your dog. No sense in breaking your start line just to submit a video. I guess point 3, I'm not sure if it's a third point or just a training peeve of mine. Maybe Jen could speak more to this because I'm not doing live in-class work with people, but I remember that when I did it for myself, I did not have the time or the patience or the ability, given the number of people who were there trying to run a course, to watch you set up a dog or me set up a dog, lead out to obstacle 3, come back, reinforce, then reinforce after taking just obstacle 1, then come back, set them up again, and then maybe the third time attempt a 22 obstacle course, right? And so I wanted to always separate the agility from the start line stay. If your start line stay is that broken, you need to work on it. You have a fair amount of work to do, a large amount of work to do that can be done away from the agility field. So when you come to class, you get someone to hold your dog. So that's what I would do. When I took my puppy, and I know I was the worst, I'd show up for these beginner and intermediate level classes, and there'd be all these prerequisites like stand and down. And of course, my dog could do none of those things, but they could do the agility thing. And I would just have the instructor or the assistant instructor, or I would bring Sarah. So for those of you who have a partner, a spouse, or a friend, you can do this for each other. I would say, please hold my dog. My dog has absolutely no start line, sit or stay. But my dog was always happy about doing agility, because there can be so much stress when the start line is addressed, issues with the start line is addressed in the class situation, because you have this pressure to get it done because you only have a certain amount of time for the turn and your turn. And then suddenly the dog becomes stressed, and now you've created potentially a lifelong issue, right? And I never had to worry about that. I showed up in class and I know we don't have a start line. Let someone hold your dog. We also started using cones. And I wouldn't use a small cone. I prefer to use a big one, so it's a little bit easier to
so like a wrap start,
so you can send them away from you wrapping, so this way you can get ahead a little bit. It's not going to let you lead out 3 or 4 obstacles perfectly and hold positions and throw a bunch of fakes and things like that, but it will let you get some separation.
So I think there's one thing that you just said that I think kind of wraps up this whole entire process, or this whole podcast, and is a part of what each of the 3 of us have said. You said that people are feeling pressure to get it done. And I think that is truly like the underlying element that we're talking about in all of this. People are feeling a pressure to get the 8 obstacle sequence taped for feedback, and they aren't necessarily paying attention to the best way to break down the sequence for their dog. People are feeling pressured they know they don't want to go on when their dog misses a contact or a weave in competition, like Jen said, but they feel the clock pressure, and they just want to reattempt it and then continue on. And they don't take the time to do the full 3 obstacle FEO, even though it is part of the rules. And in your instance, people are feeling pressured to do the sequence, even though their dog is not holding a start line. So they let go of criteria. So I think basically what we're saying is, in all of these situations, that pressure to get it done is largely artificial. And so you have to kind of push back against it and recognize when you can take that moment to fix something or correct something or break something down or do it different, and kind of get it out of that, the clock is ticking mindset that we have when we run a course in a trial, which obviously is very different. But practice and also when you're doing FEO, take the time to do the correct thing, rather than letting that kind of external pressure push you into habits that are not the best for your dog's learning in that moment. And that's it for this week's podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Synoviton OA and hititboard.com. Check out the Teeter Teach It, only at hititboard.com. The Teeter Teach It is an easy-to-use tool that controls the amount of tip on your teeter so you can introduce motion to your dog in a gradual way. Go to hititboard.com for the new Teeter Teach It and other training tools and toys. Use discount code BDA10 to get 10% off your order. That's hititboard.com. Happy training!
Thank you for listening to Bad Dog Agility. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information, updates, and links to all our socials, just check out our website, www.baddogagility.com. If you haven't already signed up for our email subscription, we would love to have you join the BDA community. Until next time, take care.